Building in Web3, Crypto Regulation and Technology.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Mike Prasad, and I'm going to lead this talk. We're going to discuss building for Web 3.0, the challenges, the technical side, the talent side. In a global infrastructure, global landscape, building for Web 3 is particularly difficult. So we have a great panel of people with tons of experience in different areas to talk about that. I'll let everyone, starting at the end, if you can just come down and tell me about who you are, your background, and we'll get started.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. They put me on last spot here. So I'm Gabriel Lander. I'm from Brazil, and I have Bloco, business design for Web3 consultancy. And I'm also a regulatory lawyer with 20 years of experience.
Awesome, and then I'm Mark Camball. I'm a developer for Rome Blockchain Labs. Been through a few projects with them and built a few DeFi apps. I work with JavaScript more than I talk to people usually, so this is a treat.
Hey guys, you're probably sick of seeing me up here, but my name's Alex. I'm one of the co-founders of Rome Blockchain Labs. I'm actually filling in for a panel speaker who had to drop out at the last minute. Yeah, so my primary focus at Rome Blockchain Labs is both targeting high-quality innovation in the blockchain space, where we can actually bring some of the Web 2 focused solutions that people are used to into the Web 3 space to bridge that UX and technology gap.
And I'm your moderator, Mike Prasad, co-founder of a company called Every Creator. We're a platform for creators selling and producing in the Web3 economy, and previously XVC. So everyone on this panel, I think, has a unique experience from different aspects of building technology products and implementation. Specific to Web3, though, we're talking about a borderless environment. And so that brings not just the idea of global challenges, but a level of automation, structure, implementation, and talent management that is just new to the space beyond just the idea of simply global workforce. So let's first talk about the talent side of things. Building a team in this environment, if we can build product, you got to have a team, right? What are some of the challenges that you guys see in building a team specifically for Web3?
Sure. I guess the first word that comes to mind for me is trust. You really need to find the balance there of you're hiring someone internationally. You can't really have the oversight, so you have to really take that leap of faith and hire the right person and really trust that they're going to kick the ball for you and they're going to take on that project and they're going to drive it. You can't manage it as much as you would traditionally, especially if you're in person. You have to trust them and share it. Other than that, I could talk about this for ages. Just a little boots on the ground nugget. We found that it was much easier to hire people outside of the Web3 space, train them up, and bring them into Web3. There's a lot of kind of hygiene issues there. It's we could talk more in depth, but I'll pass it away.
Certainly, yeah, that was definitely one of the things, Mark, that as we were starting up Rome was a bit of a question, right? Because everybody who comes into Web3, be they for decentralized finance, NFTs, even metaverse, now that that's expanding, they typically start in with a set budget and say, I'm going to go and hire a smart contract developer for $250,000 a year to build my service, right? And you can do that. The problem is, if it's your first Web3 project, how do you know that that person's actually worth $250,000 a year salary? How do you know that the contracts they're building, lest you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for auditing, is going to be able to safely secure your service in the way that you anticipate? It's actually far more beneficial in terms of scaling opportunities to have one core or two core developers, Mark for example, and then bring in people with Web 2 experience to then learn those services to kind of act under the tutelage. You see that type of pattern of almost like a Guru Chela-esque system throughout almost every other aspect of development. So why not use that in Web 3 as well?
Yep, I totally agree. And from my perspective, what I usually see my clients do is have no clue of the product, instead trying to build the team first. And I would do the other way around. I always advise them first, have a clear product view, and that's where I usually come in also and try to help them with that. Because if you know what you're building, then you know the people you need. And that vision will also guide the people to develop the business. Without that vision, without that backbone, it's very hard to have a successful project, because sometimes you don't even need to write a smart contract. You can use platforms that are already there, and that will lead you to your business. So have a clear vision of your product first, and then build the team based on that vision.
I like what you all just said, because it's a challenge I'm facing right now as well. So we're hiring, we're fundraising, and my CTO is amazing. I head up products. We have a clear vision, and that went a long way to be identifying talent that would fit that vision. But what we're also finding, what you said, was that we only need one or two really good Web3 talent. It's not even, ideally, everyone would have Web3 experience. But the reality is, in the current market, there's not that many people that actually have senior Web3 experience. But the skill sets in Web2, it's still programming, right?
Yeah.
How do you see the vetting and the ability for a founder or a head of talent or HR to look at Web2 talent and decide, are they a good candidate for Web3 implementation?
I think there is some skills that actually pass over. One word that really sticks for me is uncertainty. If you have someone who's very comfortable in uncertain situations and knows how to learn and is hungry for it, that's going to go a really long way. Because realistically, like, regulations are changing all the time. The technology is changing all the time. So do you want someone who's up to speed right now but isn't going to learn quickly? Or do you want someone who's going to challenge you and build your team and make everything better as you go?
Absolutely. One of the things that we look for at Rome is actually, it's a quality and a facet that I wish they would actually educate more younger generations on as they emerge into this space. And it's that we're entering a place where you can no longer be successful and run a team where the employees and the peers expect to be told what to do all the time. I mean, most places have middle management, upper management that tell people, okay, do this, do this, do this, when you're done, come back to me. Do this, this, and when you're done, come back to me, right? But the nature of Web3 technology is that it's evolutionary. It builds off itself and grows far faster than any manager, as much as they might think highly of themselves, can actually ever oversee. Instead, you need to be able to locate, target, and really collaborate with the type of people who are willing to take risks and grow. Just like Mark's saying, find people who enjoy uncertainty. Find people who want to do something meaningful. And when you have a clear vision and you have somebody who's willing to take on a challenge, you find yourself an all-star.
Well, I totally agree with what both of you guys said, and especially the train Web 2 people into Web 3, because the experience that people have in Web 2, they are really transferable. And I think, for instance, if you think about DeFi, what's happening with smart contracts on a very public forum right now is what used to happen in closed forums. So if you have engineers who were able to provide enterprise-grade solutions that will stand for the long run, with the correct product vision, they have already the technical skills, because the technical stacks, they are. I mean, you can do Web3 in Java, you can do Web3 in Go, and all those languages that people already master. And but for me, the final touch would be, don't think about the talents individually, but think about the team. You have to have a good, high-performance team to build things. You can have, top talent. It's like, football teams, soccer teams, or sports teams. If you can have top talent, but if they don't connect, nothing is going through. And if you have a medium talent, but they connect themselves, the beautiful things happen.
I can comment one little piece more on that. I think there is a slight transition in the space where we had these kind of rogue actors going off and building a new protocol. And now, as you're saying, we're getting into the institutional space. We need to start bringing in some of those like mainstream technologies and mainstream protocols. So that does mean you got to shift from like a single rogue, very strong developer who's a genius into an integrated team.
That's a really great point, Mark, and it's something that I think people who are building in Web3 and who might not be familiar with the space need to be keenly aware of as they proceed forward, is that for the past couple years, Web3 has been very mercenarial in its approach. Everybody's been a mercenary. You pay me $50,000, I give you a smart contract, I leave. No accountability, no engagement, very little communication, right? And believe it or not, that actually worked. Because the space was so new and so under-evolved, anybody who had enough focus and energy and drive could be wildly successful by taking everything on their shoulders and pushing it forward. But you're not seeing that anymore. You're now seeing protocols and platforms that are developing, starting with 5 people, starting with 6 people, who might have met actually in a Telegram forum or met on Stack Overflow or something. I mean, Rome started with myself, a guy in Calgary, Canada, I was from Pittsburgh at the time, and a guy all the way in Helsinki, Finland, who had never met in person, and we built a company that's now 30 people full-time after have not met each other for 8 months from the initial start date. That's the type of emergence we're seeing now. What this means is that collaboration is key for success in DeFi and in Web3 in general. You have to be collaborative. You'll actually probably face some pullback as you get on those core Web3 developers. They might be used to an environment in which they're not responsible for communication. They don't have to do code reviews. They don't have to worry about people checking over their shoulder. Not necessarily in a managerial way, but just in a conversational manner. So it's these tendencies to be aware of and actually work out. And when you do, you will be successful.
So many questions, but I think based on everything you guys just said, because in my head it's kind of a conundrum, right? You're talking about the need for teamwork, the need for cohesion, the need for persistence of vision within a small team, no longer a mercenary. At the same time, you're talking about a decentralized workforce where you're not in the same space, you're spread out around the globe. Not decentralized, but the idea is that it's not in the same physical or managerial constructs that create cohesion in larger organizations. And then you have this idea of the whole ethos behind Web3 being a little bit more efficiency. So how do you blend those dynamics together in the sense that the code, especially in on-chain context, need to be elegant, need to be clean, need to be efficient, and the teams need to be that much more cohesive because of it, but they're also that much more distributed.
Yeah, and I think something to really take a step back from and look at is that the coronavirus pandemic has changed the geography of work. Everybody works from home now. Web3 is changing the geography of the mind. It's allowing people to understand that systems can be built and operate tremendously efficiently without needing to have a centralized hub like an office space or a singular meeting space, right? So the way that you address that is actually by unifying the vision or the mentality of people. Traditionally, we've had to force people all into one room, all into one building, and then through proper guidance, innovation, development value would be built. Well, you can't do that anymore, and in fact, you actually don't have to. What you do have to do is unify the purpose around why you're doing what you're doing. There's a reason that, typically speaking, integrous companies succeed in the long term. That's because companies that are just there for a quick buck, or companies that want to actively scam or hurt other people, typically don't survive shakeups in the market because the people who are doing it are all in it for themselves. They're there to the most benefit, number one, which is typically themselves or their family, in short order. When you can build a vision and build a purpose that actually transcends just yourself, and understand that by doing what we're doing and by working together, we can make the world better for literally everybody and get paid to do that, you'll have people lining up to come work with your team.
Well, I think coming from Brazil gives me a different perspective on that because to be in the international market, we had to be able to do work from a distance from the early days of Web 1. So Zoom meetings, Google Meet, all that was in our agenda way before even the pandemic. The pandemic gave us, a head start on that. But to be in international projects, you had to be on those environments and to coordinate really well on those environments. And I think that happens with also other countries that are not, central to development. I mean, developers in Vietnam, in India, in Ukraine, they're all really used to doing work through Slack and video conferencing and being agile in that environment and being cooperative in that environment. So bringing that to Web3 is, for those regions, is pretty natural, even though it might be unnatural for companies that are used to having, their headquarters and people in there and meeting and doing the stand-ups in front of each other. I've been through stand-ups virtually for 4 years now, and they work.
I think I'm hearing the theme of focus from the two of you. I'd just like to point out there's another aspect of focus which we learned along the way, but if you don't know what you're not doing, then you don't know what you actually are doing. So it's very important to define the boundaries and just say no, that's off limits. That's not in scope, and then you can push that off the table, and that helps a lot. Just bringing that laser beam focus in.
In this idea of focus, pandemic has pushed more people to be accustomed to working virtually. But how do you achieve focus, clarity of vision, and persistence, and just that idea of being real in what you're doing and not doing within a team, across geographies, potentially language barriers? Are there new methodologies, approaches, maybe beyond the stand-up, right, that you found helpful in accomplishing these goals?
I have a unique perspective coming from a mining engineer background, but I liken blockchain projects kind of like a junior mining exploration company. You kind of know that there's resources out there and there's that gold nugget to find. And it's all about kind of resource allocation and can you put the energy in the right spot and then set some milestones to know when to stop looking there and when to start looking somewhere else. Milestones would be a big part of that as well. Something that you can concretely get to and then abort if it doesn't work.
Well, that's a tough question. I like to look at history to see that just the environment and the technology aren't enough. So the frameworks are actually what's key. So not many people know, but when electricity was invented, it didn't change anything in terms of efficiency and scale and etc. It all changed when Henry Ford invented the line of production. The production line. So we're still searching for the production line in Web3, the model that will enable all the efficiencies that the technology allows us to do. I think startup culture has has come a long way, with the focus on iterations and rapid prototyping and MVPs and putting things to market and testing them faster and breaking things fast and learning fast. I think that's the kind of spirit that you want, and you want that in a team. You can't do that, again, individually. You have to have people on high performance working together. Otherwise, the learning gets lost. So, to summarize it, you have to build an organization that is able to learn effectively.
Absolutely, that really is a great question, and I do see at Rome that we're actually building that type of assembly line for mass manufacturing that you might say, is that one of the things we've learned in the company is that we have to mirror the environment that we're building in. If I'm building really, really critical pharmaceutical technology or a really experimental drug, right, I can't build fast, break fast, unfortunately, obviously, right? We have to be methodological in our approaches. In the Web3 space, one of the defining characteristics is actually the decentralization of the markets and network, right? This is no longer like a hub and spoke. This is not a pyramid. This is an interconnected web where one thing can go down and 5 others can pick up the slack. Or 7 things can exist and 8, 9, 10 can be added with relatively little barrier to entry, right? So you have to understand that your company needs to mirror that environment. If you look at traditional companies, what are they? They're all hierarchies. You have workers, you have middle management, upper management, executives at the top, and then that's pretty much it. One of the drawbacks of this system is while it can actually withstand quite a bit of back and forth friction in terms of market dynamics, is the ability to communicate information and make decisions within a hierarchy is relatively inefficient. Somebody at the bottom or the lower management has an idea, they have to send it some way up to the top, top approves it, send it back down, they begin building. It's kind of a triangular system. Well, in a decentralized web, you can just have one node or one like product owner, one team has an idea, says, hey, I think this is going to be great, sends it out on Slack, says, hey guys, what do you think? Marketing can do this, biz dev can do this, these guys can do this, not in an enforcement way, but just as a suggestion. Everyone says, yeah, that looks great. And then you immediately begin production across 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 departments all at the same time. You've essentially scaled up your productive capacity in a way that has really never been possible before outside of a flat organization dynamic.
That's interesting. That's a fascinating, if I were to draw this out, right? This idea of scaling not through hierarchical means, but through nodes but more so those nodes being specialized. So the idea is it's functional nodes. And think about network topography or like even a network architecture, right? Every distinct subset is not overlapping as opposed to specialized in their area of expertise, and you create a workflow that passes through each of those sectors, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic wherein you can either do functional node distribution where you have a department for this, department for this, department for this. Problem is, the human's natural tendencies are to attract towards or move towards things they're familiar with. So you'll see a kind of a hierarchical, probably I'm assuming, redistribution. If you instead focus your team dynamic around a product specifically, you'll be able to scale much faster. So this might be something that's kind of dynamic at Rome, mostly because we have 5, 6 internal projects for the overarching Rome Blockchain Labs company. But what we see is that we have 1, 2, 3 front-end engineers, a back-end engineer, a marketer, and BD all in one group in one meeting. They're talking together. It's not front-end and then back-end and then marketing. And then on a second project, you then have back-end, front-end, marketing on a separate side doing something else. They can collaborate horizontally. That way, all of the work is churned within itself, and then the solutions are propagated out through the network. Instead of having to be done here and then bounce over here and then bounce over here, it's all done internally and spreads out.
So in a way, it's like a three-dimensional topography.
Tremendously so, yeah.
In that model, which I think is absolutely fascinating, you create efficiencies and specialization, and it allows each individual player who is contributing to own something and really go deep in what their expertise is. Potentially, though, on the counterpoint, does that create more risk in failure and redundancy, let's say, in terms of not having the same visibility or the same checks and balances in such a 3D system?
Great question. Oh, sorry.
Sure, I'd just like to classify the types of risk. There's like the known risk and the unknown risk. And clearly, I think you're totally onto something on the known risk side of things. Like some of these security models, if you don't have the right security person in place, then you're going to have a bad time. But we found the more vile risk would be the unknown risk, and the best thing you can do for that is having more eyes on the ground with the autonomy to actually do something about it. And having that kind of self-organizing team model has been a great help for that.
Yeah, I would add that there are, as I said, you have to mirror at some point the sector that you're attacking, and not every sector will culturally fit the decentralized model. So you have to know your culture. You have to know the people that you have, and to have a decentralized organization and to put decentralization, not autonomous. I mean, holacracies and all that. You have to have really strong processes and culture, and you can't always have that. So sometimes you have to, and it's not always. You don't always need that. That's a trick of things. You can get into Web3. And without being a decentralized organization, so you can make that move, and we don't really know how it's going to be. If it's going to be all decentralized, if it's going to be B2B to C, and that means that the next banks will be like a baker shop in the corner, but it's still an organization, and that baker shop is going to be hierarchical, but on top of a decentralized infrastructure. That would be actually my bet on things, on many things. But we don't know how to get there yet. But to get there, you need to know who you are. who you are as an organization, who you are as a market. And once you know who you are, then you can have a good plan on how to get there. And I would add that the break things is also a lot related to what kind of risk you're facing. So sometimes you have to move fast, to learn fast, to know the unknown. But you have to do that with the risks that will not put you out of business. So you have to know what you can break to learn.
So we're out of time, but I want to wrap with the idea that I think the takeaway here is that the work environment should mirror the work being done in the industry we're in, but especially given the nature of this Web 3.0 space and building for Web 3.0, there's a lot of extra thought that needs to go into the contextualization, the qualitative elements, and communication methodology around operating the talent in this new model for it to work and scale efficiently in a better way than we would otherwise see in traditional technology businesses. Thank you all for talking and sharing the insights. I think the idea of a 3D hierarchy is definitely worth exploring some more, hopefully another time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.